Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam and as always I'm joined by my lovely co-host, it's Josh Baker and Joe Roberts. How are you two doing?
Not bad, thank you, Sam. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Joe?
Oh, I'm very good, Sam. Very good.
That's good to hear. And we are here for a Turkish Grand Prix review. The race finished a few hours ago and we are here to break down all the action as well as some of the other talking points over the weekend. First of all, guys, let me get your reaction to the race. What were your general thoughts?
Sorry. So I thought it was a very good race. Very intense. Shame that it couldn't go on to like dries. One car took a chance on it, but it didn't really work. But overall, it was a very, very good race.
Yeah, from the parts that I saw, because I was at work and watching at the same time, but from the parts of the race that I saw, it seemed interesting. There were quite a few overtakes when I was watching. I don't know if it was throughout the whole race, but it seemed quite lively. So yeah, I thought it was a good race.
Josh putting the podcast first. It doesn't matter if he's working. He is watching the race at the same time. Got to respect the grind. But yeah, no, it was definitely an exciting race and a few things to break down. But first of all, let's start on Saturday with qualifying. What were your what do you think were the talking points? What were the things you pointed out from qualifying?
I just found it funny how the Ferrari just didn't put Sainz out. Basically, they put him out in Q3, so they knock out. So they knock out Ricciardo, and then when he didn't participate in Q2, but then when Leclerc got through to the final in Q3, they then made him out to get a drag. So I thought Ferrari played it quite well in qualifying. Then also you got to big up Mick Schumacher for actually putting his car into Q2 and not crashing, and he's actually able to drive and take part in Q2, which was amazing to see for a Haas. But other than that, it was quite exciting. But obviously Lewis was just the best out of everyone on that day, and it's just a shame he had the penalty, but it was definitely quick all weekend.
Yeah, Josh just basically summed it up there. The only thing I can add up to that is the usual spinners in the qualifying with Tsunoda and Mazepin spinning around, but yeah, Tsunoda after he actually kept in a straight line. I think he got into Q3, which is unexpected of him. But his teammate in the last 10 races, he's I think been in all of them. No, he's been all of them except from 3, I think. So Gasly doing his bit for the Alfa Tauri there, but as Josh said, the shock was Ricciardo not getting to Q2, but I'm interested into why Sainz didn't go for Q3 to give the slipstream in Q3.
It was interesting. Russell as well. Oh, that was another talk point from qualifying. Very unlucky because he'd have made it into Q3 if he didn't lose it on the last corner. I think he went on the Radiators race engineer and was like, would I have made it without that? And they were like, yeah. And he was absolutely gutted. But yeah, Mercedes were dominant all weekend, and that did start in qualifying. To add to the list of usual spinners, I think Carlos Sainz, because he also spun in the qualifying. He gets to final practice or qualifying, and he spins pretty consistently now every week. But then he'll get to the race, and he'll just be really consistent and do like really well. He did really well today in the race. So yeah, I think you need to add him to the list. But yeah, big up Mick Schumacher. I'm gutted because in my predictions for this race, I said if Haas were gonna get points, it would be here. And after qualifying, I was like, they actually have a reasonable chance. And then Fernando Alonso just ruined him. And talking about Fernando Alonso, let's talk about the big talking points from the race. And the two main ones were on lap 1. both involving Fernando Alonso. The first one was at turn one, where Alonso went spinning after making contact with Gasly. Gasly was had Perez coming up his left and Alonso going around the outside. So Gasly was sandwiched in the middle and he got a 5-second penalty. First of all, I'd like to put it to you, do you think he deserved a 5-second penalty? Because in my opinion, it was very harsh and he definitely didn't.
I think it was a little harsh, but I can see why it was given, because obviously he had Perez on his inside, but I think we didn't really see Perez until that late, because you could see he was quite turning into him a little bit, and then he noticed he was there, so he quickly turned to the right, which then jolted him across to Alonso. So I think if he knew that both of them were there more, he was slightly more aware, then it might not have happened. Yes, you can say it's harsh, but in all effects, he's hit someone who was 4th at the time, and they've now gone back to 15th. So I think something small like that maybe has to be done. But I agree with it being harsh, but I still think something had to happen as a consequence.
For me, it was a penalty. I think Gasly should have squeezed up onto Perez, and then it would have been Perez's fault for colliding with. But I think, yeah, it would have been Perez's fault before colliding with Gasly. So I think Gasly should have squeezed up onto Perez.
I think that's very harsh, because even the FIA in their rulings, it says they give so much leeway for the first lap, and that was literally the first corner. So carnage is happening anyway. Fernando Alonso came out in an interview after the race and said it was a racing incident. He didn't even deserve a penalty, and that's the car that went spinning. He's the one who normally would feel who would want him to get a penalty, but when he comes out and says it wasn't a penalty, you've got to be thinking that it was harsh. I also think him getting, I think it was 2 penalty points. For context, Bottas and Stroll got 2 penalty points for what they did in Hungary. So the same punishment for in terms of penalty points for that incident, which in my opinion was very much a racing incident. And the carnage was Stroll and Bottas, where they literally ended several cars' race and went over a curb and just caused carnage. I think that's ridiculous. I know Joe's going to want to fight this.
Okay, so Sam, this is for example, if the car went left and went into the path, as in he spun but went that way, he would have caused a Bottas-like incident. I know you think it's lenient, but it's all the way that if the car went that way, went onto the racing line, it would have caused a mighty crash. And it's wet. I understand why they gave it, because if Alonso didn't catch that, he would have gone straight into the wall, and it would have caused harm to Alonso. But Alonso obviously is a very skilled driver that he can catch it. As in, I can't remember who. I think you had a number of people in qualifying nearly hit the wall from just going off wide onto that concrete. So I understand why they gave it, because it could have caused a crash. And depending on how Alonso spun, luckily didn't spin it onto the racing line, it could have caused a mighty incident.
I still think it was harsh. I still think it was a racing incident, considering the fact it was wet, the fact it was first corner, never mind first lap, and the fact it was sandwiched. But that one's more up for debate than the second incident involving Alonso, where he span Mick Schumacher. He also got a 5-second penalty. Alonso gave Schumacher a hug after the race and apologised, because he obviously knew he was wrong. Do either of you think it wasn't a penalty? I mean, what was he thinking there? Because the whole incident just looked so stupid.
It was deserved penalty.
Yeah, there's not really much more you can say about it, is there? It's a weird decision from Alonso with all his experience. He decides to try and overtake there, but or like in that manner, it's a bit strange. But yeah, it's definitely a penalty.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Let's move on to our team by team breakdown where we can talk about some of the talking points by team. Let's start off with Mercedes and Red Bull, the two front runners. Both of them had good weekends with, of course, Bottas race winner, Verstappen in second, and Perez in third for Red Bull, so completing the podium. And then Hamilton recovery drive. But let's talk about Hamilton quickly, because the big talking points after this race are about Hamilton's pit strategy. Joe, I know you're very angry at the Mercedes strategists, but what do you think he should have done there? Do you think, I guess there's three options. Do you think he should have gone to the end on the tyres he had? Do you think that the team were right to bring him when they did, or do you think that they should have bought him in earlier? Because I think that they should have bought him in earlier if they were going to pit him.
They should have, if they were going to pit, they should have done an undercut on Perez. And it amazes me how they didn't do an undercut. So they didn't. And then you're thinking, okay, they're going to the end. They have to go to the end. Obviously, people see Ocon's tyres and think, oh, but you got to think Ocon has less downforce. So it means he can't look after the tyres. Hamilton has, I think, more downforce than Bottas. So it means that he can look after the tyres for the whole Grand Prix. Even if you, I think last year, there wasn't even much wear on, or even though it was slicks, basically intermediate tyres last year, Hamilton took that 50 laps. So for me, I think they took the wrong decision took the wrong decision. I think coming by lap 50. And then obviously caught up to, I think it was Leclerc, and then had the graining phase, the overheating phase, but then after that came, the tyre suddenly came back to him. It was literally all over for the podium. And I think Perez was like 6 seconds in front of Leclerc. So for me, I think Mercedes kind of screwed Hamilton over. He was rightfully angry. And you can't blame Hamilton for being angry, because he's the one controlling the car, and he should have been told he would have lost the podium position.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I saw Karun's picture of Lewis's tyres on Twitter, and the middle of them were basically slicks like he did last year. So I think if he stayed out, it would have been too risky. I think the grip would have been much lower, so it would have been trickier to drive the car. So I'm not sure he would have gained any places anyway. I think personally they should have called him in earlier, because by calling him in when they did, it was like, oh, you've got like 9 laps to try and heat these tyres up and then get past two drivers to get into the podium, which is, even though it's Lewis Hamilton, it's too much to do in the conditions and on those tyres. So I think pitting him earlier, where most of the other drivers pitted, would have given him enough time to heat them up and then attack the rest of the drivers with the pace he had all weekend. It was strong. Even at the start of the race, he was the quickest driver out of everyone, just going through the field like they weren't even there. So I think Mercedes have made a mistake this weekend, but it happens. Like Sochi, they made the best call, and he did what they did. So he just thought, well, they're telling me to come in now, so it worked in Sochi. Why not listen to them and see if it works in Turkey? But sometimes it just doesn't work, and sometimes you just got to do it himself. But it's a one mistake. They still had a good weekend, because they still had Bottas winning, because he pretty much had a flawless race. Didn't put a foot wrong, and he clearly looked stronger, faster than both Red Bulls as well, who just didn't seem to be as quick as usual. But yeah, I think the rest of the team will be happy. But with regards to Lewis, just pull him in earlier and then see what happens.
Yeah, it was. I agree with you, Josh, that I don't think he could have gone to the end. The team had to bring him in because if I don't remember who made the point, but if, for example, Lewis had a tyre blowout 2 laps to the end, then they could have dropped so many more points on Max, which could have been crucial in the race for the title. So I think they had to bring him in. They should have brought him in earlier. However, they bringing him in wasn't the problem. It was just the timing of it was wrong. But for those who think he could have gone to the end, he probably could have done. But there was just no need to risk it because, admittedly, Hamilton's now behind Verstappen in the standings, but it's only 6 points. That's not that bad. Mercedes ended up getting more points than Red Bull over the weekend, getting 36 to Red Bull's 33. So Mercedes extend in the constructors. So I think the bring it. 5th place wasn't the worst result for Hamilton, to be honest. He made up place as well, and he had a good race. And then for the Red Bulls, solid races for both of them. Is there much to say about Red Bull? They weren't really at the pace of Mercedes, but do you think the best they could really do?
Yeah, they weren't really competing in the front, were they? Because ever since the start, Bottas just pulled like a 2-second gap and just kept extending it over Verstappen. And he tried his best to close it up, but then when he did, Bottas would just pull away again. So in regards to Verstappen, I think he did the best result that he could have without Lewis Hamilton being there. Because if Lewis there, then I wouldn't have seen Red Bull getting above 3rd. So I think for them, 2nd and 3rd is the best they could have done. So I think they'd be happy. Especially with Perez inside of the garage, just for him to get another podium with the team and actually have a decent weekend and actually gain a few positions to give him some confidence in that car is just a good weekend for the team in general.
Yeah, I think how much you can slate Perez or whatever, I think he's done his job in three corners with that defending from Hamilton. I think over the whole season, I don't think he's done particularly well, but for that, I think that circuit and this race, he did his job, and that to basically protect Verstappen. I think looking on it, I think Hamilton would have pulled away from Perez, which then Verstappen couldn't have pit because so I think Perez did his job because let Verstappen have a buffer to then pit, to then go on to Inters and go to the end and follow Bottas. But Verstappen just couldn't keep up with the pace of the Mercedes. So I don't think the Red Bulls had much pace this weekend, but did a solid job.
Yeah, they certainly did. Let's move on to McLaren and Ferrari's battle, starting with McLaren. Norris, 7th to 7th, probably the best he could do. And Ricciardo, after Ferrari absolutely mugging him off in qualifying, he decided to take an engine penalty starting at the back and recovered for 13th, but didn't really show much pace. What was wrong with the McLarens this weekend? Because after 2 really strong weeks in Sochi and Monza, they were so off the pace today. Was it just a fact of the track didn't suit their car?
Yeah, the track didn't suit their car. I think there's possibly, I'm just looking at the calendar, possibly one track in the next 6 that are I would say a bit like Turkey, which is Qatar, the Qatar circuit. So I think McLaren will get an overall. Obviously, the Ferrari looked very, very ridiculously strong, and how much I slate Ferrari, I think they're very impressive this weekend. But again, their car is very track dependent. So they might be strong around USA. I think they traditionally have been quite strong. Obviously not last year because they just had a terrible year. But Ferrari were very, very strong this week. Their car just suits. The reason I say maybe Qatar will be the circuit where they'll potentially struggle is because they're good at low speed and then low speed corners and then straights. They don't like long medium. So I think Seidel said medium speed corners. So that's basically the whole of sector 1, the whole of sector 2, and then sector 3. They can't really use their strength, which is the power of the Mercedes. So I think they did well for what they could have achieved. The most shocking was to see how Ricciardo just didn't go through the field that I expected him to, because Sainz was on a rocket ship this week, and Leclerc was very, very impressive as well. And Norris just did a solid job.
Yeah, I was going to say before Joe said it, I just think the McLaren car suits straight line speeds, and you can see it just from Monza, which is just mainly straight, which is why it did so well. And also I think the Ferrari car definitely suits tracks with more corners and more. Yeah, but literally what Joe said is the reason why Ferrari were much better this weekend. But I agree with Joe in regards was Ricciardo started behind Sainz, so I'm surprised he didn't just follow him through whenever he overtook. So when Sainz overtook Russell for the first time, I was like, well, Ricciardo's just going to get him at this next corner or the next lap. But he just kept looking at him. He just kept getting stuck behind him. So it was a bit strange to see. Maybe he's just not used to these type of conditions in that car. Or if you get what I mean, not the weather conditions, but as in regards to the car itself and the track. But I'm sure it's just a one-off for him, because he's definitely got his confidence back after Monza and a few other races. So it'll be a weekend possibly to forget, but I'm sure they'll bounce back in USA and be fighting further up the field with Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. But with Ferrari, I think Leclerc should feel really sorry or a bit upset that he didn't get the podium, because I think he deserved it. Just got unlucky with the grading stage and the last stage of the tyres to then lose out to Perez. But I think both drivers should be happy with the points they got, and even McLaren, they should be happy with 6. They only lost 10 points to Ferrari, so they're still ahead in the Constructors' Championship. So it's not panic stations yet, but they still could have had a better weekend.
Yeah, it is 10 points gained for Ferrari. Just quickly, 2 excellent driver lineups with Leclerc and Sainz and Norris and Ricciardo. But who is going to finish behind the constructors, McLaren or Ferrari?
If I look what I said with the tracks, I think the only tracks McLaren are going to struggle on, looking from last year, for example, you can kind of get a lot except from obviously Ferrari, but you can from McLaren's. I think they're going to do well in USA. Sorry, I just need to quickly get up. So yeah, I think they're going to do well at USA. Mexico is very similar, I would say, to Monza. Brazil, they're going to do very well. Qatar is similar to, I would say, very similar to Turkey. Saudi Arabia has just got straight, very long straights, a bit like Baku. So Ferrari could be similar, and then Abu Dhabi, where it could be similar. I think if McLaren maximize their points in the next 3 races, I think they could be out of sight. So I would say McLaren quite comfortably.
I think I'm in slight agreement. I think it will be just McLaren, but I think that'll be just down to that McLaren have more consistency in their races in compared to Ferrari. If you look at previous race results, they seem to be in or around the top 10 more consistent than Ferrari. So I think that'll be the reason as to why they'll just sneak ahead of them. But it'll still be a fun and a close battle till the end. But I think just because of the consistency, McLaren will beat Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a hat trick of McLaren, but I think it'll be close. Ferrari will push them all the way. But yeah, just due to that consistency, I think McLaren will edge it. Let's move on to AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, and Alpine, starting with AlphaTauri. Gasly had a really good race, starting fourth and finishing sixth. I'm pretty sure my predictions, I said he'd come fifth. So I was a bit gutted, but I'm glad he had a good weekend because he really did deserve it. And then in the other car, Yuki Tsunoda, despite a good qualifying, starting ninth, he had a spin, finished 14th. So, which kind of sums up his season, really, where he showed promise and then he'll just spin and it will just ruin his race or qualifying. This time it was his race. He actually did well in qualifying. But yeah, how would you evaluate AlphaTauri's weekend?
I was actually... don't worry.
No, sorry, Josh. You go.
Okay. I was actually going to mention all three at the same time because I think all three of the teams had a pretty similar weekend in terms of one driver performing reasonably well and obviously Gasly doing really well to make it into the points, but then the other half of the garage is just either getting unlucky or making mistakes. So like Vettel decided to go into the pits and mediums for some strange reason. Tsunoda spinning and then Alonso getting hit. So I think each team had a pretty similar weekend, but thanks to the class of Gasly, they had a probably just better weekend. But I think if it was Ocon that got hit and it was Alonso further up, then he'd be fighting Gasly and possibly Norris. So there's just a bit of luck unlucky on both sides. But yeah, I think they all had similar weekends. But in regards to AlphaTauri, it's just like you said, it's just pretty much becoming a similar story every race weekend with Gasly's just outperforming that car and putting it probably where it shouldn't be, but he's such a great driver. He puts it there himself and does really well, and then Tsunoda just constantly making mistakes or spinning or getting hit. So it's just the same old story for AlphaTauri, really.
But Josh has basically summed it up. I was going to go in a more detailed breakdown of AlphaTauri, and it's basically Gasly is carrying AlphaTauri on its back. I don't know how many points. Sam probably going to say this now. How many points Tsunoda's got? But it's another.
14. I think it's 14.
He's got 8. He's got 18.
18 points, and I think Gasly's got over 100.
Gasly's got 74.
Well, that describes then it's Gasly's carrying AlphaTauri on his back. I think if he had another driver, I think AlphaTauri would have been in danger of overtaking Williams or being under attack by Williams in the constructors. I think that's how bad Tsunoda's doing. But obviously the race, in the race terms, guys did very, very well. And then you got Aston Martin. I don't know what brain on earth was Vettel's engineer doing. It was a very weird decision. Crofty couldn't figure out why. Even Button as well couldn't tell why you would pit. And then, as Josh said, Alpine could have been fighting with the McLarens and Gasly, but I think just with the hit and obviously Ocon going ridiculously long on those tires just didn't materialize. But I do think Alonso, I'm probably over exaggerating it, probably could have got a podium in the way that I think if he got ahead of Perez, and obviously Leclerc was very stretching those tyres, it could have changed the whole ball game of the race. But sadly, we couldn't see it because of the hit.
Yeah, I want to go into more detail on this Vettel strategy because it really was bizarre. It was so clear that it wasn't intermediates was still the best tyre. And Aston Martin recently have made so many strategy errors, it's unreal. They did really well strategy-wise at Monaco. That one comes to mind because their strategy there was sensational. And they've had, I think, one other race since there where strategy-wise they'd got it spot on. But since then, it has curtailed off a cliff. I mean, going on mediums is one of the stupidest things I've seen in years. It's just so, and the lap he had on mediums was so tragically bad. I thought he was going to get lapped by a Haas. It was that bad. So, what were they thinking? That I can't even put words together just to sum up. But yeah, what do you guys think on it? It was sure that was just stupid.
It was definitely strange. I didn't even see him pit. I went away at this point, and then I came back and I just saw he was spinning off the side of the track. I was like, he's just made a mistake, and he'll get back to it. But then they zoom in and he's carrying on driving. I'm like, are they yellow stripes on the side of those tires? I'm like, why is he on mediums? It's clearly wet. There's not enough. It was some sort of dry-ish line, but it definitely wasn't dry enough for slicks. But it was just a weird situation where clearly miscommunication maybe, but it was just strange because you could just tell. Look at every other driver and what laps time they were doing on the intos, and then just see there was no chance of mediums being an option, let alone actually putting them on. It was just an odd thing to see, but gave the race a slight bit of enjoyment.
Yeah, as I probably said on my assessment of Aston Martin, of like the whole, like the team as a whole, I thought it was a pretty clueless. It was probably the worst decision any team's done this season. The first one is making the car, Haas making a car, but yeah, that's probably the worst decision ever made.
Ever made, not just this season.
No, sorry, this season. I got to point out because it has been some stupid decisions over the years, but this is probably up there.
Yeah, it certainly was clueless. I want to give Tsunoda a bit of credit because we have criticised him a bit. Going back to him, just saying he held Lewis off for quite a few laps. So credit him for that. That was a highlight of the race, and he actually did really well. But then he spun a bit later and ruined all hopes of points. So
I like the race.
What?
It was a very good move, but I know Lewis Hamilton did it twice. But why is that the highlight of the race?
I'm not saying it's the highlight of
his race.
I'm saying it's the highlight of his race.
Oh yes, but still he spun.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said it was going great. He was holding off Lewis well. Lewis eventually got past, and then he spun and took away any chance of points, which just wasn't really ideal. Let's move on to Alfa Romeo. Not really much to say on these two drivers and their weekend. However, I thought it was largely positive. Raikkonen 17th to 12th, Giovinazzi 16th to 11th. Giovinazzi is heavily criticised. Almost got a point. Both of them were near the points. How do you assess their weekend? I mean, not really much to say, is there?
Average.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say is basically criticising the other three teams ahead of them in the constructors. I think that's all you can do, because how the hell an Alfa Romeo can get a pass, an Alfa Tauri, an Alpine, and Aston Martin, which are clearly 100% better cars.
Don't forget the McLaren.
And the McLaren, okay, it's quite embarrassing that Alfa Romeo got beat a McLaren. And wait, I saw in the timing thing, they overtook Ricciardo, not the other way, as in like Ricciardo go and hold up. We got overtake. We're not going to discuss that because then I'll get into it was as in the Alfa Romeos didn't have any right to be in 11th and 12th or even get near the points. And if they got a point, I think that'd be a very, very lucky feat.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely got lucky to be where they were, just thanks to stupid tyre decisions, spins, terrible weekends for qualifying, and just stupid moments in the race. That's why they were high. But give credit to them, they managed to keep both of their cars on the track, and they pitted when they should have, and they still somehow managed to fight for a point almost. So in fairness to them, it was well played from them, but they did get very lucky to be where they were.
You make your own luck in the sport. That's about, and that result, if Joe Velazzi had got a point, might have secured him a seat. But it was still a really good result for him, and he does deserve that seat over Guan Yu Zhou. I maintain that. But let's move on to Williams. Again, a pretty non-weekend. Russell really unlucky not to be in Q3 in qualifying with his spin. He started 13th, finished 15th, so not really sure what happened there. And then Latifi started 15th, had a spin early on, finished 17th. The Williams just didn't have the pace this weekend, did they?
No. And another silly error from another driver from Latifi. But they had no race pace this weekend. They clearly had some pace on qualifying on Saturday, but as you said, just that one mistake on the last corner from Russell just stopped him from getting into, was it Q1? Q3. Oh, it's the wrong way around. Q3. It wasn't the best weekend. They just didn't have any pace, kind of like the McLarens in that way. But I'm sure they'll bounce back as they always do, and they'll be fighting again.
Just a very average performance.
There's not really much to say. Now let's move on to everyone's favourite team, Haas. And I know that some people are pretty angry with a man by the name of Nikita Mazepin this weekend, but let's start with the positives. Mick Schumacher qualified 14th. Admittedly, that was the only positive because they then got spun by Alonso lap 1. So the positivity didn't last long. And I feel really bad because Schumacher actually, after a great qualifying, deserved even like a 13th for him would have been quite a good result. But got really unlucky. That's the positive. Let's move on to the negative. Mazepin, 18th to 20th. I mean, not really a surprise he's last, and not a surprise that he blocked another driver under blue flags. This time, Hamilton. Question is, do you think he should have got a penalty? Because it was a pretty clear block and it was pretty clearly stupid. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone on the grid just mobbed him at some point.
First of all, I was watching at a time when the front three caught up to both Hasses, and I was watching it just go around, and I was like, Schumacher was he was last at this time. And he literally really early on just pulled out the way, slowed right down, let them pass easily. But you carry on watching, and I'd be like, the same point next lap maybe you'd have Mazepin just keep going. They're getting closer and closer to him. We just kept going and just didn't slow down or do anything like Schumacher did. So he's like he doesn't think or just doesn't know they're there. And then the one with Lewis, when Lewis is clearly going to overtake him, go around a corner, but then he just cuts him off, and then it's like, no, you can overtake me on a straight. It just doesn't make any sense in my mind. I'm sure it doesn't make any sense in anyone else's mind, but I think it definitely deserved some sort of penalty, whether it was small or bigger, but it definitely deserves something because it definitely slowed Lewis down.
I think this is getting pretty ridiculous. As I think I predicted early on, like in the season, that there will be a time where Mazepin crashes out of the championship like leaders or contenders. Nearly happened here. It nearly did, and if that did happen, I think Mazepin should have got like a 3 race ban or something ridiculously. I still think you should get a race ban because he's done that consistently throughout the season. I think he did that to Leclerc, Russell, even his own teammate. He spun. I think it's getting to a point where you could put a postman into an F1 car, and he'd probably do a better job of getting out the way of any car that comes past him. You could put Gunter Steiner in, and you do a better job than Mazepin. I think it's getting ridiculous, and we probably keep on saying, as in you praised him, I think it was Monza. I don't know why you praised him, but you did, Sam. But yeah. I think there's clueless people in Haas on why they're retaining him for next season, because he will just get more penalty points and then end up getting a race ban, because I think he's 3 off a race ban or something. I bet he'll get that this season. I bet USA will block somebody on formation lap. No, it's not formation lap, but on a out lap when somebody's on a lap in qualifying, or again blue flag.
If he blocked someone on a formation lap, that would be pretty impressive, getting some penalty points for that. But no, it's we have another year of this. Yay!
Another year of me moaning at people.
Yeah, another year.
I love that, Joe.
Another year of us criticising him pretty much every race. You mentioned me praising him. I don't remember when that was. It was probably because he didn't get lapped one of the races or something. I don't remember that. But yeah, he's in the sport because of money. We say this every week. He's going to get a race ban at some point. He should have got a penalty. Admittedly, he'd done nothing to race position because he's lost every race anyway. But he should have got penalty points, so he would be closer to a race ban. He's great for entertainment.
Does anybody know how many penalty points he's got?
No. I feel like he hasn't even got the most on the grid, though.
I feel like Norris has got the most for nothing. And you got Mazepin doing stupid things and you're only getting like 1 a race. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's because the FIA, I feel like, are pretty lenient with them, because it's like you're lost anyway. But they should give penalty points anyway, even if they're not going to give him like a 10-second penalty.
If you're giving a penalty points for like Gasly's incident, for example, I know it's argued, it shouldn't have been or couldn't, it shouldn't have been, or it shouldn't have been a penalty. But the argument 6. That you could, sorry, what?
He's only got 6 penalty points.
How?
Because the FIA are so lenient on him, because they're like, you're lost anyway, we're not going to punish you. That's the problem.
Well, this is the consistency. As in, Gasly's got 2 penalty points for a collision. And then you got a blue flag, which for me is a lot worse than a collision on that one, because you could literally take out the lead of the race. And then he's done some stupid stuff in the earlier races. I don't know how it's accumulated to like 10 points or 12 points. What is the race penalty points for a race ban? Is it 15?
12, isn't it?
I was 12. So he's 8. He's got 2 more incidents.
It'll be interesting to see if he does it this season. That'll be very interesting. But as much as
sorry, Sam, that is also for a year.
Yeah. He will definitely. Yeah, he's 100% getting a race ban. It's just when he does, as much as he's a bit of a meme, he's a laugh and a joke. The thing with Mazepin is there's such a danger he might end a driver's life just from like being an idiot or seriously injuring a driver because he's so dumb. Like he has nothing up there. He is so stupid and literally doesn't understand the sport that he is just a threat to the 19 other drivers on the grid. And it's honestly terrible. But let's move on from criticizing the worst driver on the grid.
Ever.
Let's talk about your best driver of the weekend or of the day. Let's talk about driver of the day. Who have you guys picked?
My driver is definitely driver of the day, not weekend, because he didn't really participate in qualifying, even though he helped his team out a little bit. But I think mine's pretty obvious. The majority of fans voted for him as their driver of the day, and that's Carlos Sainz. Starting from P19 and ending up where he did it's ridiculous. He cruised through that field towards the start and just made those overtakes look really easy, and just it was pretty much around the same corner each time as well, which was quite funny. But yeah, he had a solid weekend, and to go that far up and to make that Ferrari look that strong on this track was really impressive. And he's clearly and obviously my driver today.
Yeah, I was very tempted to give it to Mick Schumacher if he didn't have obviously that collision, because it's very impressive. It's like George Russell situation where you got a really slow teammate, but you yourself get the maximum out of the car, which means you get into Q2. But I'm going to give it to Charles Leclerc just because for me, even though he qualified third, which is a very mean feat. Obviously, Perez probably should have done a lot better to qualify into fourth. Obviously, because Lewis Hamilton got pole, even though apparently he didn't. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that because that's probably a different subject of how the FIA are very stupid between poles and being the fastest of qualifying. But yeah, Leclerc had a solid race, could have won it if he stayed out, but obviously didn't have the pace. And if Charles Leclerc pitted earlier and then got through the graining phase, I think he would have got a podium. But overall, Ferrari and Leclerc as himself got very impressive points, and that's why he's my driver of the day.
Both excellent choices, and both Ferrari drivers, so they clearly did something right this weekend. Just going to pick you up on something.
Big up Latifi.
Big up Latifi. King Latifi. You put Nicholas Latifi in the same category as Nikita Mazepin, and that is an insult to King.
Can I just say,
Latifi,
did I see him spin on the first lap?
That's fine. He didn't have a good weekend. He didn't have a good weekend. He didn't have a good weekend. That's fair enough. A lot of drivers didn't have a good weekend. Ricciardo didn't get points this weekend. A lot of drivers didn't have good weekends. Latifi has got quite a few points. For a bit, Latifi had more points than Russell. His race pace is actually solid, and he's getting better. So I'm not hearing Latifi jibes, and I'm definitely not hearing him be put in the same category as Nikita Mazepin. But onto
okay, Sam, you're putting him in the same category as Nikita Mazepin, whatever his name is.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, the reason I'm saying he's the slower driver is because if we go back to Netherlands and I think Monza, where Robert Kubica was in the car for Alfa Romeo, he did, for me, as in 2 races, a better job than Latifi did in the Williams. In how many races been in the car? Like 3 or 4, 3 seasons.
Yeah, probably.
So for me, that's why I don't put him in the category, but I put him in the Tsunoda category.
Latifi is doing a good job. He's just got generational talent next to him, making him look bad, in my opinion.
He's part of that generation talent.
He will take Lewis Hamilton's seat. Don't you worry about it. But anyway,
if he takes Lewis Hamilton's seat, I will eat a shoe.
Right. Okay. That's not interesting. Just picturing that in my head. That deal. We've got that on video now. But let's move on to
Wait. Also,
oh my gosh! Let me move.
What happens if he doesn't?
Oh, I don't care if he doesn't. You're the one who's made this stupid bet. Oh, yeah. Let's move on. I'm looking forward to watching.
Driver of the day, Sam.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Joey Ashu. My driver of the day is the race winner. It's Valtteri Bottas because the obvious choice was Sergio Perez, especially bear in mind his merchandise. I love the man, and he probably deserved it. However, Valtteri Bottas, both of you shaking your heads, but Valtteri Bottas was sensational all weekend, qualifying second, only behind Hamilton, who has 7 world titles, so I think that's excusable, but he beat Verstappen, who looked pretty decent, and then during the race, he was faultless. He did sensationally. That's his 10th win, moving him to double figures, and it'll probably be his last win in Formula One. We don't know what the laws and the new rule change is going to do next year, but I don't think that Alfa Romeo are going to be battling for some wins. So it probably is his last win unless he does something magical towards the end of the season, which I hope he does. But yeah, he was sensational. Shout out to Perez, though, and both Alfa Romeos, who also deserve a shout out, and Stroll, who managed to somehow lost the whole race on the same set of tyres. But anyway... who did I say? Stroll. Yeah, Ocon. Yeah, I meant Ocon. Sorry. You've confused me now. You've waffled on about something irrelevant. But let's wrap up the podcast there. We've given some detailed thoughts. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. The absolute mess at the end. Remember to like, subscribe, download, listen, whatever you need to do. Next race is Austin, Texas for the American Grand Prix in 2 weeks. We'll have a preview for you then. We might have something in between. Probably not. We always say we might. Probably won't. But if there is, then lucky you guys. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you then. See you later.